everyone, welcome to Lizzie's Little Library and the Newbery Project. I am reading each of the Newbery Medal winners in chronological order and just noting any trends or themes I see as the series progresses. We are up to the 1960 winner, which is called Onion John by Joseph Krumgold. Joseph Krumgold is the first author to win more than one Newbery. He had previously won a couple years earlier for a book called And Now Miguel. So by this point, we have very clearly figured out the Newbery pattern, if you will. They like to award the prize to books that are about children growing up. And they particularly like children growing up in different time periods, different places. This is definitely a books around the world sort of selection committee. So the earlier book, And Now Miguel, was about our little boy named Miguel, who is a sheep farmer, and he grows up and learns, more of an adult perspective to life as opposed to a child perspective. This book is called Onion John. And it is also about a boy who grows up and learns adult perspectives and not a little boy perspective. So essentially it's the same story, just different characters, different setting. This one is a little bit different in the sense that Miguel was very clearly focused on his family. And this one is more about a relationship with a neighbor. So I will give you a summary and some thoughts, so let's get reading. The story begins at a Little League game where Andy, who's our main character, Andy makes the winning play. The team goes out to celebrate, but rather than drive with the team, he wants to walk through the junkyard and chat with John, even though he can't understand John, aside from, well, good day, which is how John ends every conversation. From the description, from the superfluous use of the letter Z the author uses, I'm guessing John speaks Polish, but it's never clearly defined. Andy says that John does most of his shopping at the junkyard. On this particular day, he's collecting bricks. Andy spends some time with him and realizes that by relaxing and taking it in, he can understand John. And John understands English, because of course we do, because, that just makes the story so much easier. We learn that John comes from the other side of Europe. Which side is that? We don't know. My guess is Poland, could be Hungary, I don't know. His neighbors employ him to tend to their gardens and crops. I get the impression that he is a vagabond, but he seems harmless enough. I wondered, too, very early on in this book, I wondered if John has a mental disability. And I'm not going to try and diagnose him, but he does seem to be very, very childlike, very immature with a lot of his decisions and thought processes. For example, it hasn't rained in a while, so he plans an event in which the whole town will fast for a day, then have a processional to the water where they will throw in the mayor. Andy and his friends convince him that 3 people are enough. So Andy, his friend, and John will be the ones in the parade. And Dad tries to explain the science behind rain. He has visions of Andy going to MIT and becoming an astronaut. Keep in mind, Andy is like 12 years old right now. So calm down, Dad. I understand the importance of planning for the future, but at the same time, what's the harm in Andy participating in a tiny parade? Let him make some memories. We also learn that John eats onions like other people eat apples or pears, hence the name. So the rain procession doesn't work, obviously. John says it's because he forgot his quartz stone at home. 3 days later, it rains after John redid the procession by himself. It's the perfect amount of rain for the crops without any flooding. Dad congratulates John, but later tells Andy that he is older than John in many ways. The next adventure is on Halloween. Andy and his friends always have a banquet, which is cake and candy. They invite John this year, and he leads them through purifying the basement of spirits, done through lighting sage. The kitchen fills with smoke, And yeah, I can understand Andy's parents being reluctant of this friendship. Dad goes with Andy to John's house to fix the door. The house is a hoard pile of stuff from the dump, best way I can describe it, and the door won't close. Dad announces the Rotary group will rebuild his house as their next project. The whole town joins together to build a nice house for John, although he's more concerned about where he will put his 4 bathtubs. The house gets built in a day, but before the housewarming, the house burns down. We learn that John accidentally started the fire because he didn't understand how to use an electric stove. Dad and the other men want to rebuild exactly as it was. Andy thinks they should leave John to live how he wants. He notes this is the first time he and Dad have ever been on different sides of a decision. John decides he's going to fumigate the entire town to cleanse its spirits. Andy tells him that's the worst idea he's ever heard, and they decide to run away together so the town will stop trying to fix John. Andy sees their situation as being very similar, with Dad planning his whole future. John decides to leave Andy in the town because he became grown up and stopped believing. Andy and Dad talk. Andy wants to be just like Dad. Dad runs the hardware store in town. Dad wants him to do more than he did with his own life. They agree to wait and see. The end. So this book, it was not great. I neither loved it nor hated it. It reminded me a lot of The Pigman by Paul Zindel, which is a story about kind of these jerky kids who take advantage of a lonely man. In that one, he was a widower. Kind of the similar thing that, John is very desperate for friendship and Andy is friends with him while it's convenient. Eventually, Andy realizes that John is not necessarily making the best choices. He's not looking towards the future. He has very simple beliefs, things like he can purify a town of its spirits. And Andy is more academic, more science-based, and they do have a falling out of sorts. The end of the book gives us a very clear indication of how the story ends. It is a 1-paragraph epilogue, which I do like. And the ending is fine. Whether John stays in town or if John goes to another town, it's fine. His purpose in this story was to teach Andy about being an adult. Not that John was doing the teaching, but that Andy was looking at him saying, I don't think this is how adults should act, and I don't really want to be part of this anymore. So in that sense, John was just a tool in the grander story. I thought, if I was Andy's parents, I would not have supported that friendship with John. I don't want someone burning sage in the basement. One part that was kind of funny at their Halloween party, it's really just a big excuse to eat junk and candy and cake and everything. So this is on page 72, and I thought this was cute. At last we started. Bo poured out the ginger ale. Then John stood up and held his glass and rattled away for a few minutes. He hopes we won't get distemper, I told the others, and we get through the winter. It's a toast. Everyone has to give a toast. Bitsy thought a moment and got up. Melba, he said. That's a toast. Each got up and said French. I said dry, and Bo said buttered. We drank our ginger ale. And I thought that was kind of funny, that, just the different uses of the word toast. Aside from that, though, this book really wasn't all that memorable. It was a story about a kid and his unusual neighbor, and the kid kind of outgrows the unusual neighbor. I thought John's actions were very obvious, or forthcoming, or telegraphed well. It's like, as soon as they started talking about building the house, you knew it was going to be a problem, and John wasn't going to want to live in the modern house, and and then they said, oh, well, there's a fire at the house, and you immediately think, oh, well, probably because John tried to light a fire in the stove, thinking it was like an old Coleman stove or something. So, the foreshadowing was very obvious. The story was fine. I didn't really like Andy all that much as a character. I don't like John as a character. I can't really recommend this book. It's, it's so similar to the Pigman, and I guess I would recommend that one over this. It's honestly, they're just, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So this is Onion John. It was a bit of a snooze. The next book is Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell. I did read that one when I was younger, and I thought it was boring. So I'm hoping as an adult I will have a different perspective. So I will get to that soon enough. Onion John, not really recommended. Not terrible, just kind of boring. So that is this review. Thanks for watching.